Hi everyone, Dr. O here, and today I want to talk about these unique seafloor materials known as polymetallic or ferromanganese nodules. Now, this image was collected by NOAA's Ocean Exploration Group as part of Dive 17 of their North Atlantic Stepping Stones expedition back in 2021. And you can see the abyssal seafloor here is littered with these very dark, black, knobby rock materials. And these are those nodules that I'd like to discuss today. And so, one interesting potential new discovery that's only recently been published on is the potential that these materials are producing oxygen, so called dark oxygen, because it's done in the depths of the ocean where there's no influence of light, or in this specific case, no influence of biology, potentially. And so, back in 2024, Andrew Sweetman and his colleagues published a study titled Evidence of Dark Oxygen Production at the Abyssal Seafloor in Nature Geoscience. And in this study, Dr. Sweetman and his colleagues showed evidence from several benthic chamber experiments they conducted in the Clarion-Clipperton zone of the Central Pacific, which is an area where there's vast fields of these nodules in the deep abyssal waters, that showed when they placed these chambers over areas with present nodules that a large amount of oxygen relative to what was expected was appearing in their measurements. Now, this is very different than the typical expectation on the seafloor where we see oxygen production tied to biological activity. And in some of these experiments, they had introduced materials that would have stopped or neutralized biologic activity, but still continued to observe this oxygen production. And so, what Sweetman and his colleagues hypothesized was that an electrical potential, a voltage from the nodules themselves, might be producing electrolysis, right? The process by which a water molecule, H2O, is split into its constituent hydrogen and oxygen atoms. And now they conducted some measurements of the voltages of these materials and found that the highest measurement they recorded was almost a volt, right? I believe their measurement was 0.95 volts, which is pretty close to around the 1.2 volts required to actually conduct electrolysis. So this provided some evidence to suggest that this may be an abiotic source of oxygen in the sort of seafloor environment in these abyssal plains where these nodules are largely present. Now, of course, this is groundbreaking if it's true, and there's been no shortage of criticism about these findings and the study itself. Some of the most robust criticism has come from the Metals Company, which is a company that is invested and involved in studying these nodules, essentially to use them as a potential mineral resource for technology, for the other things we need metals that these nodules contain, for our civilization. And so they have a as of yet unrefereed, but pre-published on a preprint server study that they've sort of proposed as a criticism of Sweetman's, which is titled Contributions to the Discussion of Novel Detection of Dark Oxygen Production at the Abyssal Seafloor. Now, I do caution that at least as of yet, this study hasn't been peer-reviewed. It's not in the refereed literature, but you can read it on Earth Archive. You can examine what they are claiming in terms of their criticisms. Largely, they're pointing to potential issues with the chambers themselves. One major criticism they propose is that there was a control conducted with 3 chambers which were not, introduced into these nodule environments that were kept sealed off, and 2 of those 3 showed a lower magnitude, but still an observed oxygen production. Now, Sweetman has responded to that by suggesting that those 2 chambers had been flushed with surface seawater, and that may have introduced some materials, some oxygen bubbles that resulted in that. Meanwhile, that process failed for the 3rd chamber. Only the deep abyssal waters were present in that chamber, and that showed no oxygen production whatsoever. So this is definitely an active area of continued research, debate, and discussion. And of course, it may ultimately be that this sort of quote-unquote dark oxygen from these nodules turns out to just be a measurement fluke, or an error that got interpreted over broadly. But this is a really exciting sort of cutting edge activity on abyssal seafloor science right now that I think is really interesting, something I'm excited to discuss and share with all of you. Some things I think about when I'm considering this: oxygen levels in the ocean are relatively well measured, at least where we can get out and measure them. And at least as far as I've seen, I haven't noticed any measurements or observations of enhanced oxygen levels proximal to these large polymetallic nodule fields, which I would expect if there was kind of consistent or robust electrolysis occurring with these nodules. But Sweetman and his colleagues suggest that their contention isn't that this is something that's continual or very robust, simply pointing out their study suggests it's a possible source of some of this oxygen, and that this may be a unique and interesting part of the geochemistry of the seafloor. So please contribute your thoughts and comments below this video. Tell me what you think about the possibility of quote unquote dark oxygen coming from these nodules creating electrolysis. This is something I am very interested in, and in fact, I have several of these nodules from the CCZ as part of the OEI Marine Geologic Materials collection. So I'll be interested in the near future to maybe look into what I might be able to measure in terms of these being a potential voltage source, or just in general what the future might hold for these materials. There's a lot of very timely topics concerning polymetallic nodules, especially as we're entering a world where mining these wholesale may become a more common practice. That's something that certainly at an ecological standpoint, with very sensitive biology at the abyssal seafloor, could be highly disruptive to organisms that we may not even have discovered yet. But share your thoughts, comment below, and let me know what you think about these really incredible materials on the seafloor, and where you think this sort of hypothesis of polymetallic nodule dark oxygen may go in the future. So hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you all beneath the waves.